Like and subscribe.
This incident happened 3 years ago. I heard about it from an avid amateur fisherman, Dennis. The man is a fishing fanatic. At each of our chance meetings, the conversation is always the same: tackle, cool places, trophy catch. Moreover, there is no way to transfer the conversation in another direction. From any topic, Dennis returned to his favorite hooks and pikes within a minute. Of course, I am also not deprived of this pernicious passion, but not to such an extent. In addition, I prefer only its summer, more comfortable version. Unlike Deniska, who swims in the water all year round. More than once a man climbed the shore, probably, of all the lakes in the Chelyabinsk region. It was on one of these lakes that an unusual story happened to him. I don't remember the name of the lake. Looks like Irtyash. Although I could be wrong. Dennis was fishing on that June day alone. The weather was not good. Fish, too. There was no cool. The stubborn angler, as if wound up, threw a spinning rod, but from the dark depths, no answer, no hello. Weekday day, and even rainy with the north wind. Not a single living soul around. It is clear that normal fishermen do not even bother to try their luck, only to waste time in vain. There is silence on the swampy shore, overgrown with thick bushes and forest. Even the birds fell silent. There is no mood to chirp in such a gloomy time. And suddenly Dennis hears a short whistle a little away from him, from the swing of the thrown tackle. Either spinning or feeder. But, strangely, there was no further splash of water from a fallen lure or feeder. A minute later, the rustling whistle is repeated, and again silence on the water, not a single splash. What miracles! The sound of the thrown tackle cannot be confused with anything, especially for such an experienced angler as Dennis. Meanwhile, silent casts continue. But who is fishing so strangely through the thick bushes cannot be seen. The man could not stand it, and, in order to satisfy his curiosity, he went, bypassing the coastal thickets, towards the mysterious fisherman. Judging by the sound, he was only 10 or 15 paces to the left. But having walked along the coastal slope about 100 meters, Dennis, discouraged, did not find anyone. He returned back to his place and soon again heard the familiar short whistle of the thrown tackle. What kind of delusion? Again he went around the bushes and went down to the water, just in the place where he had just heard the strange sound. Nobody. But the place is quite convenient for casting. Although it's a little crowded, you won't swing much on both sides of the small patch. Dense vegetation hangs over the water. Purely for the sake of formality, Dennis half-heartedly threw a lure. And then he felt the blow. Yes, what? The fishing line rushed to the side and dragged to the depths, almost pulling the fisherman into the water. Yes, this is not some vagrant perch or small-eyed baby bee. A serious specimen caught on the hook. After a 10-minute stubborn struggle, a man with a pounding heart from excitement brought a 10-pound fish to the shore. Well, pricks. During his long fishing biography, Dennis saw such people only in the northern rivers, and even then only a couple of times. It took another 10 minutes to drive the toothy monster into the landing net and finally drag it up to land. Having dealt with the monstrous pike, Dennis laughed happily, looking at his hand shaking with tension and excitement. Wasting no time, inspired by unheard of luck, with redoubled energy, he began to throw spinning. And from a happy place, and from nearby small patches. But in vain. The lake seemed to have died out again. After spending several fruitless hours on the shore, without waiting for a single bite, it was already dark. The fisherman with his only, but what, trophy set off on his way back. Dennis made several next trips with spinning to other water bodies. But everything was drawn to the same lake, where he caught a huge pike. And although he did not like to return to the same place, he returned there. Less than 2 weeks had passed. This is how the fishing thought works. If you are lucky once in some place, it seems that you will continue to catch big fish there. This time I came with a friend partner. The weather was favorable, the bite was. But there was one little thing. Somewhat disappointed, Dennis and his friend, so ready to stay overnight, returned home in the evening. Reasonably deciding that giant pikes, like shells, do not hit the same point twice, the fishermen spent the summer on other reservoirs. Again, my friend returned to this place at the end of August, after almost 2 months. And that is by accident. I decided to stop by on the way for a while, returning from the distant Chelyabinsk lakes. I made a couple of casts on the familiar shore when I suddenly heard a familiar whistle in the direction from which my heart suddenly pounded in excitement. Everything was repeated exactly as then, the rustle of thrown gear and silence. Not a slap on the water, not a splash. Dennis excitedly moved towards the sound. Again, no one in the bushes. The place, however, is already different, a little away from where the 10-kilogram pike was caught. But something told the peasant that he had to be ready for a good catch. And the inspiration did not disappoint. From the very first, not very distant cast, a lake predator sat firmly on the lure. Toothy was smaller than the first one, but even a 6-kilogram copy pleases the fisherman a lot. In addition, in an hour Dennis fished out 2 more of the same fish. Loaded with trophies, the man returned home. And he no longer doubted that his fishing luck was closely connected with a strange whistle that suggested fishing spots. Until late autumn, he continued to travel to his favorite lake. And somehow, on one of his visits, I found a strange couple on the shore, a young guy with a girl. Those were in civilian clothes and without fishing equipment. But what puzzled Dennis the most was that a bouquet of flowers was placed next to a birch that grew on a hill near the shore, as if to a monument or a grave. In the ensuing conversation, it turned out that exactly a year ago, the guy's father died at this place. Or rather, they found his body. The man was an avid fisherman. He went on his forest trips for a few days. 1. Didn't like company. And he never came back empty-handed. Moreover, he brought such specimens that the jaws of other fishermen fell off. When my father started having heart problems, doctors and relatives urged him to take care. But the man did not imagine himself sitting at home at the first aid kit with Valocordon. Continued to go fishing, as before. Ultimately, one such trip ended in failure. The deceased fisherman was discovered by random travelers. The place where he died was quite remote and swampy. Also, it's hard to get. Not every car could get here along the forest potholes intertwined with the rhizomes of pines and firs. So the corpse lay for at least 3 days, until they stumbled upon it. What he heard greatly saddened Dennis, and sunk into the soul. He was almost sure that the strange whistle that pointed out cool places to him was emitted by the invisible tackle of this particular fisherman who died here. From such an incredible assumption involuntarily became uneasy. He did not fish again that day. Shortly after the departure of the guy with the girl, he also got ready and drove home. Somewhere in those days he told me about all these unusual events. Autumn was cold. And then came the early winter. Summer gear has been postponed until next year. Over the long winter months, the sad story of the dead fisherman was forgotten. And with the advent of the May days, Dennis, with the same passion, got out with a spinning rod to the shore, which promised such a coveted fishing luck. He didn't plan to stay until morning, the nights were still quite cold. But by the evening he did not return home. He didn't show up the next day either. The wife sounded the alarm. 3 days later, searches were organized, but they were not required. The corpse, stuck in the reeds, was found by random fishermen sailing in a boat on the lake. A short investigation concluded that the death was non-violent. The man inadvertently went too deep in the rubber waders and sat down in the muddy, viscous bottom. It was impossible to get out without outside help. From sudden movements, the quagmire sucked deeper and deeper, and the wave raised by the wind completed the job. The fisherman drowned. So the drowned man stood for 3 days in the reeds, held in by his swollen jacket. On the shore, in his knee, the lay 2 rotten hefty pikes spinning was nowhere. Most likely, Dennis hooked the 3rd trophy pike on the lure, but in the heat of the fight with it, he went too deep, which ruined. And the pike, along with the tackle, sailed away. But, of course, this is just a guess. Don't forget like and subscribe.